The deputy's boots crunched across the frozen ground of Plainfield, Wisconsin, November 16, 1957. The night air was brittle, sharp enough to sting the lungs. A thin moon gave no light. Only his flashlight carved the path forward, its beam trembling across the warped siding of a lonely farmhouse. Inside, the air was worse, thick, damp and sour. A smell that was part rot, part oil, part something older, something unmistakably human. The beam swept over walls mottled with grime. Newspapers layered like scales, piles of trash reaching almost to the ceiling. Dust hung like fog. And then the light caught something else. A chair upholstered in skin. A bowl carved from a skull. A lampshade stitched together from the face of the dead. The deputy staggered back, gagging, but pressed on. He opened the door to the shed. What he saw froze him in place. Hanging upside down from the rafters, split open from chest to crotch, was the body of Bernice Warden, decapitated, gutted like game in deer season. The farmhouse of Edward Theodore Gein was not a crime scene. It was a museum of the grotesque, an archive of the unspeakable. And what police uncovered that night would not just shock the people of Plainfield, it would shake the American conscience, inspiring decades of horror stories, films and nightmares. But Ed Gein didn't begin here, in a house of trophies and bodies. His path had been set long before the first grave was robbed, long before the first bullet was fired. To understand how this man became the Butcher of Plainfield, you have to step back to 1906, when a frail boy was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin, under the shadow of a woman who would define his every thought. Edward Theodore Gein entered the world on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse, Wisconsin. From the very beginning, his life was set against a backdrop of silence, repression, and control. His father, George Gein, was a broken man, an alcoholic who could barely hold down work and had long surrendered to despair. His mother, Augusta, was the opposite, domineering, fervently religious, and unyielding. She saw sin everywhere, especially in women, and she planted those fears deep into her son's mind. Gein's father worked as a carpenter, tanner, and firefighter. He also owned a local grocery store, but soon sold the business and left the city with his family to live on a 155-acre remote farmhouse outside Plainfield, a place where isolation became law. Neighbors were distant, friends non-existent. Augusta dictated every aspect of life inside those wooden walls. She read the Bible aloud to her sons, Ed and his older brother Henry, dwelling on passages about death, damnation, and the filth of lust. In her view, the world was wicked. Women were instruments of the devil, and salvation could only be found through obedience to her. Ed was a shy, timid child. He had a lazy eye and a soft, almost feminine demeanor that made him the target of bullies at school. While other boys wrestled and played, Ed kept to himself, quietly smiling in a way that unsettled his classmates. He idolized his mother, clinging to her approval, and when she scolded or ignored him, it carved wounds that never healed. On April 1st, 1940, Gein's father died of heart failure at age 66. Gein and his brother Henry began doing odd jobs around town to help cover living expenses. Henry, his brother, eventually began to resist Augusta's suffocating grip, but Ed never did. To him, she was more than a parent. She was a prophet, the voice of God itself. And when Henry died mysteriously in 1944 during a fire on the property, suspicions quietly circled. Ed had been the last to see him alive, and though the death was ruled accidental, whispers suggested something darker. With Henry gone, Augusta's hold on Ed tightened even further. when Augusta died the following year, Ed lost the only compass he had ever known. Her passing left him adrift, abandoned, and desperately clinging to her memory. He sealed off the rooms she had used, preserving them like shrines, untouched by time. The rest of the house fell into squalor. He retreated deeper into solitude, reading pulp horror magazines, obsessing over anatomy and fixating on graves. Something inside him unraveled quietly, steadily, until obsession became the only form of love he understood. Gein held onto the farm and earned money from odd jobs. He boarded up rooms used by his mother, including the upstairs, downstairs parlor and living room, leaving them untouched. He occasionally worked for the local municipal road crew and crop threshing crews in the Plainfield area. The quiet of Plainfield at night was broken only by the scrape of his shovel in the cemetery soil. Between 1947 and 1952, he admitted to 40 nocturnal visits to local graveyards. On most nights, he returned empty-handed, emerging from a trance as if waking from a dream. But on some occasions, he exhumed bodies, mostly women whose faces reminded him of Augusta, and carried them home under the cover of darkness, each corpse a secret relic for his growing collection. In 1954, Mary Hogan, a 51-year-old tavern owner, vanished. Evidence would later link her murder to Gein, though he sometimes claimed to forget the details. The town murmured of missing women, of shadows moving in the fields, but no one suspected the quiet man who lived alone on the farm. Then came November 16th, 1957. Bernice Warden, the hardware store owner, disappeared from her store in broad daylight. Her truck had been seen leaving the premises, but no one knew where she had gone. It was her son, Deputy Frank Warden, who would discover the horrors hidden on Gein's property. Gein had been in the store and was expected to return the next morning for a gallon of antifreeze. A sales slip for the antifreeze was the last receipt written by Bernice Warden on the morning that she disappeared. That evening, Gein was arrested at a West Plainfield grocery store. Inside the farmhouse, authorities uncovered the remnants of years-long obsession: skull bowls, lampshades of human skin, masks, legging, corsets, shrunken heads, and other artifacts painstakingly preserved. Each object a dark echo of his grief, his loneliness, and his warped fixation on becoming his mother. Beyond the confirmed murders of Hogan and Warden, Gein's name was whispered in connection to several disappearances in Wisconsin. Yet lie detector tests and circumstantial evidence would clear him of these, painting a man whose violence was singular, methodical, and rooted in an unshakable psychosis, a lifelong obsession with death, skin, and ritual. In the shed, Bernice Warden's decapitated torso swung silently, a grotesque testament to Gein's grim craftsmanship. The sheer, methodical nature of the scene, each object catalogued, each artifact carefully preserved, forced investigators to step back, stunned into disbelief. Crime scene photographs captured the macabre details, yet even in the sterile lens of the camera, reality seemed to bend. Soon after his mother's death, Gein began to create a woman's suit so that he could become his mother, to literally crawl into her skin. He denied having intimacy with the bodies he exhumed, explaining they smelled too bad. During state crime laboratory interrogation, Gein also admitted to shooting 51-year-old Mary Hogan, whose head was found in his house, but he later denied memory of details of her death. Gein admitted to stealing from 9 graves and led investigators to their locations. Initially found unfit to stand trial, Gein was confined to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. Years passed, during which psychiatrists observed his compulsions, his daze-like states, and his eerie calm as he recounted past deeds. By 1968, doctors judged him competent. In a trial held without a jury, Judge Robert H. Golmar presided over a courtroom filled with hushed anticipation. Gein was found guilty of murdering Bernice Worden, yet legally insane. His confession of grave robbing and his admitted killing of Mary Hogan only confirmed a life steeped in compulsion and delusion. The ruling was clear: confinement, not execution. The farmhouse was burned, the land cleared, yet the image of Ed's collection lingered. Ed Gein's life after conviction was spent behind the sterile walls of the Mendota Mental Health Institute, a world of white corridors and humming fluorescent lights, far removed from the forests and fields of Plainfield that had once been his private kingdom of death. Time passed, and the man who had exhumed graves and transformed human remains into objects of ritual became a shadow of his former self. Periodic reviews and mental health evaluations marked the decades. He died on July 26, 1984, at age 77, of respiratory failure caused by lung cancer. His grave, unmarked but known, lies beside his family in Plainfield Cemetery, a quiet anonymity that belied the terror he had wrought